Hi, this is Alan Stout, Executive Director of Visit Luzerne County, and today on Next Stop, we're talking about the Fine Arts Fiesta with Executive Director Brian Benedetti. We talk about the art, we talk about the food, we talk about the music, and we talk about the tradition of this great downtown Wilkes-Barre event that will be happening at the end of May. Hi everyone, this is Alan Stout, Executive Director of Visit Luzerne County, and welcome to Next Stop, the Visit Luzerne County podcast. Here, each month, we'll be chatting with people from throughout northeastern Pennsylvania that help make our region a fun place to visit. We record the podcast right here at our office, inside the historic train station in Wilkes-Barre, which served as the next stop for countless trains for more than 100 years. Our next stop with our podcast will always be with someone we think you'll find interesting. Enjoy. Hello everyone, I'm Alan Stout, Executive Director of Visit Luzerne County, and welcome to Next Stop, the Visit Luzerne County podcast, episode 5. And today our guest is Brian Benedetti, the Executive Director of the Fine Arts Fiesta, a great tradition here in Wilkes-Barre that goes back decades, 69 years to be exact.
Yes.
And we're thrilled to have you, Brian, with the event coming up next month. Thank you for joining us here on Next Stop.
Alan, it's my honor and the Fine Arts Fiesta's honor to be here.
Well, we appreciate you taking some time. I know that when you get into this time of year for you, where you're a couple of weeks out, it's probably about your busiest time of the year. So we appreciate you swinging by here, the train station at the Visitors Bureau, to chat with us about the event that's coming up. Let's talk a little bit for those. You know, our podcast goes online and it goes on YouTube and we stream it on our social media platforms. And so Spotify and so they're very well, and we hope our people outside the area tuning in. And Kyle's stats has shown that does happen. So for those of you who might be from outside of northeastern Pennsylvania, the Fine Arts Fiesta is a 4-day event that happens on Public Square in downtown Wilkes-Barre. It's been happening, like I said, it began in 1956. It features artwork, food, music. This year's event will happen from May 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th. And it's been going on for 69 years.
Yes.
How long have you been involved? I mean, that's how I met you.
Over 40 years. The first time I was involved was my first year teaching the 75-76 school year at Myers High School, and I entered students' work, and somehow someone from their committee met me, and the next year I was asked to be an announcer, and I was no longer in the secondary level, so my students were not eligible to be in the Fiesta, and I announced for that Fiesta, and then the next year, the year after, I was asked to be on the board.
Okay.
But one of my favorite stories is serving as an announcer for the Fine Arts Fiesta, and at the time they would move us to the Dorothy Dixon Dart Center at Wilkes University, and I was introducing the Society for the Preservation of Barbershop Singing, and I introduced them as the Society for the Persecution of Barbershop Singing. And they used to call me the persecutor.
Isn't that funny how you get up on stage maybe 1,000 times in your life and everything goes smoothly, and the one time you get a little tongue-tied is the one you always will remember?
Well, it's a source of humor.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's interesting. So you were teaching at Myers High School in South Wilkes-Barre. Were you an art teacher?
Yes.
Okay, so that's why you said your students.
Yes.
So you submitted some of your work, and they got to know you a little bit, and eventually they're recruiting you to help MC the event, and then eventually get on the board.
Yeah.
And how long have you been the director?
I think I've been the executive director, I'm going to say, circa 1991, 1992.
I think I met you in the mid-'90s when I was at the newspaper. I think I interviewed you for a story about the Fiesta, and you were already the director.
Well, what occurred was
ago.
We had grown so large that it was becoming unmanageable for the board to have someone serve as president and run it with all these volunteers, they needed a central person that could be solely responsible for the managerial aspects of it. And at the time, the board consisted of Joe Persico, Phil Santarelli, Al Groh, and a few others that rewrote the bylaws from the original bylaws that were written by Annette Evans in 1956 when the Fine Arts Fiesta became incorporated. And they adjusted the administrative structure and the board structure, and it's been in place ever since.
There's a couple things you said there that are interesting. First of all, you mentioned Annette Evans. Last year, she was inducted into the Luzerne County Arts and Entertainment Hall of Fame for her work as founding the Fiesta. But so right out of the gate, this upstart event, was that organized even in '56 that they had bylaws?
Yes.
That's wild
Annette Evans
to me.
was a trust fund woman who never worked a day in her life. And no one that was ever approached by Annette Evans said no.
Okay.
And she came up with this idea to bring a highly sophisticated cultural event to downtown Wilkes-Barre for everyone to experience the arts for free. And she was assisted by Al Groh, who was in the English and Theater department at Wilkes, then college at the time, and he assisted her with the organizing and getting it off the ground. But we must remember that in 1956, May was the middle of the semester for the colleges and universities, and they were all in session. So the stage was filled with musical theater, poetry readings, and drama from the colleges and universities, Misericordia, King's, Wilkes, and as well the art departments. And they would demonstrate and hold up aspects of it. Then, when the calendar year changed and there was no longer a month off between Christmas and returning to the academic higher education world, the semester ended before Fiesta, so it shuffled how we programmed.
Okay. But again, that organized right from the beginning. It wasn't like, I mean, I just think like bylaws, I think that an organization might have to exist for 5 years or so before they even get that polished. But she obviously was a great event organizer right out of the gate.
Well,
and then it evolves.
One of the proudest things I did in my career of Fiesta was being able to be the original not-for-profit umbrella to launch the F.M. Kirby Center for the Performing Arts. They needed a not-for-profit, and Mr. Boskov and I had a close relationship, and he called me in and said, here's what we need to do. Can you sign off on this? And I had our legal people get together with their legal people, as tongue-in-cheek as it sounds, and they came up with a strategy to do this. And all it was a signature that enabled them to apply for the initial grants. And the following year, they were their own separate not-for-profit identity. I think that would have warmed the heart of Annette Evans to have a hand in launching that F.M. Kirby Center.
Back in 1986.
Because it stood for everything she stood for.
Absolutely.
Yes.
This evolution over the past 69 years, as I mentioned before, when you think of the Fiesta, the first thing you think of course, is the art. It's a fine art Fiesta. But great food vendors, live music. How has it evolved from that first year? Was it always 4 days? Was it?
No, it was 3 years, 3 days until the 25th anniversary. And David Wilson, an architect at the time with Peter Boland's firm, was president, and we wanted to do something different, and they came up with making it a 4-day festival, and it has been that way since. But the contrast between today and the original Fiesta is it was a fine arts presentation, and It was very sophisticated. The stage was in the middle of the square, and there was a theme every year with medieval banners. It was an open air stage. If you were to look at the photographs, everyone in the audience had jackets and ties on. The women had hats and gloves on, and they were watching all these different performances. And there was sculpture brought in from New York City. We had Rodin sculptures at the Fine Arts Fiesta. We had Lichtenstein sculpture. We had Henry Moore sculpture on the square. And it was a presentation which made the entire square an exhibition. And it's changed now to a more multidisciplinary arts festival where everyone and anyone is involved. And initially, they would never allow someone to exhibit their work like a craftsperson unless they demonstrated. They had to demonstrate the entire time. Well, it's physically impossible, and it's very difficult when work takes on the high sophistication that it does to be demonstrating all the time. So as times have changed, so has the Fiesta changed. And I think it's much more consumer friendly and it's much more interactive friendly. But we have had some of the most spectacular things that occurred there. We had an attorney that was on the board for many, many years, Mr. Ted Evans, and every year on a Sunday afternoon or a Saturday afternoon, he would do an opera quiz. And he would play excerpts from operas, and the audience would be full, and he would give prizes and awards with opera albums. It was wonderful.
Name that tune, opera style.
And he carried that in his heart. He was a wonderful guy and serious about it.
So when it went up to 4 days from 3, did they add Sunday or did they add Thursday? Do you know? I mean, was it always
Sunday? I believe it was Sunday.
So it used to be Thursday, Friday,
Yes.
Saturday. Let's go through them all. Let's talk about the art, and then we'll talk about the food, and then we'll talk about the music. The art comes a large portion of it from local artists. One of my favorite things about the Fiesta has always been not only the fact that the artists are local, but that some of the artwork is locally themed. You probably remember her. I think she moved to South Carolina. Sue Lukavich. She used to have some great stencil artwork.
She comes every year.
Yeah.
And sponsors awards.
We had, I know I have a picture of St. Aloysius Church in my house, I believe, that she drew. And the Market Street Bridge. Kyle, who produces the podcast, had a beautiful piece last year of the train station that we're in now. I've seen quite a bit of artwork from the Market Street Bridge, and I love looking at that, whether it be photos or artwork from local. Tell us a little bit about how the artists get involved and how you go about picking it.
Again, it's a very progressive process that occurred. In the beginning, everything was invitational. And at one time, there was a playground on the square. And there was a fence around the playground. And on that fence, the Wyoming Valley Art League members hung their artwork.
Okay.
And that's where the Art League participated. And there would be a few tables there, and someone would be demonstrating. And then they had someone else. I remember distinctly the prominent artist from within the community, Andy Palancar, J. Philip Richards from Wilkes, and Chester Colson. One would be in the windows of the former Pomeroy store. One would be in the former Isaac Long store. Someone would be in the former Lazar's Windows store, because at the time they kept their artwork out of the elements. And so it was arts around the town without being called that then.
Sure.
And there was a lot of participation. And then in the mid-'70s, we had a board member, Klaus Lietz, who designed a lot of the programs. He was a graphic artist. And he came up with these huge plywood cubes. And the plywood cubes, they hung two-dimensional artwork on, and they were placed around the square. Well, as time came on, they took up a lot of space, and those artists were usually invitational. They took up a lot of space, and we started working with scaffolding.
Oh, okay.
Thank you to David Wilson, which is a process we use today. But as time went on, over where we have the Circles Restaurant and Cafe Toscano, on that sidewalk, we had a long section of scaffolding that was the student work. And then we would have 2x4s on top, and we would drop the plastic over it if the weather got bad and clip it. Well, there were quite a few hurricanes, and that wasn't enough. So thank you to Big Top Rentals, that's with us 40 years, who came to see Carol Fedoroff, who was the general chairperson. She was the vice president, and said, I'm not number 2, I'm not number 3, I don't have a number yet, I'm starting this business, but I'll be the best you ever had. And we started tenting with him, and he's been the roof over our heads ever since. Mm-hmm. And now every exhibition is under a tent. And we use the scaffolding system that we had. The only change that we have, we use carnival lights inside the tents rather than the clip-on lights that we started with, because of the adjustment when the scaffolding that we used had to be changed and it was no longer workable, that system. So we're not as thrilled with the aesthetic of the carnival lights, but it gives us what we need.
So many details. So many
little details.
I mean,
it's a juggling act.
When you walk through, you don't, I think, realize how much work went into setting this up for these 3 days. And the artists themselves, they can submit from the general public. They come from the Art League. They come from schools. Talk to us about that pool of talent.
Well, what we've done is we've made the Fiesta as accessible as we possibly can to everyone. And you have to do that within some sort of organizational constraint. Mm-hmm. And it was a very difficult process. And it was actually, I did 2 things early on the board. I broke the mold for the entertainment, and you mentioned the Hall of Fame. And the first act that we brought that was not classical, that was not traditional music, was Abilene.
Oh, yeah.
And they performed on a Thursday night, and it was like a big to-do for the board to allow that to happen. I brought Abilene, and then the other thing that I did was I asked them to consider the juried exhibition, because there were so many people at the time. LCC had a very large art department, which it still does. Wilkes College had over 200 art majors. Misericordia had close to 100 art majors. And King's had Mr. Humanic that had a art minor going on at King's. So there were all these people in the college and university level doing artwork besides those from out of the area. And we didn't have a vehicle for them to participate without, I'm taking care of you, I'm not taking care of you. So we opened it up, and the first judge that we had was J. Philip Richards from Wilkes College, that Helen McDonald, who was the visual arts co-chairperson with me on the board, brought in. And it was Ruth Schooley that championed for me to get that through the board. She was the second president of the Fiesta, and she finally said at the end of the meeting, I think we should go back and let Brian give a prize. So we developed that show, and it has 6 categories and awards, and every single award in that exhibition is sponsored. It is amazing, the community involvement in the student and the adult show. And the student jury came later because it was a problem. They were submitting work mounted on poster board and mat board. In the inclement weather, we had a hurricane and everything blew around and students lost their work. And Ruth Schooley again came with an ironing board and all kinds of things, and went underneath the stage and tried to salvage as much artwork as she could when she saw it on television. So we decided to go with them entering, the students taking more responsibility, bringing the work framed and more exhibition presentable. And when you come to the Fiesta and you see that student exhibition, you will be in awe of the quality of the work.
No, it's wonderful. And I mean, I think that when you go to the Fiesta, like I do every year, and I have been for decades now, you have some things on your checklist. Should start with the art. Let's walk around and make sure we see every piece that's on display. And then after you do that, you might want to get something to eat. And so you have
always go to the
food vendors. How many food vendors typically do you have at this event?
Between 13 and 15. My biggest example I give to new board members is always when you walk around and you see those people enjoying that event, and as a friend of mine and someone that I taught with and then was her principal, Elaine Murphy, always will say, when you're at the Fine Arts Fiesta, the world just slows down. It's a wonderful experience. The world just slows down. And I want to tell you, when you see a family walking through those exhibition tents, whether it's the adult juried, the student juried, or the Wyoming Valley Art League Open Members Exhibition, or the booths with the artists selling their work, and the parents are talking to their children about the artwork and they're having their dialogue, it's wonderful. It makes everything worthwhile. When you see a child come off that stage smiling that they perform there, it makes it all worthwhile. We had brought in, from the suggestion of Helen Grebsky, the the New York State Ballet Company, a profession. Again, I must correct myself. The New York State Opera Company, a professional opera company, and we paid them quite handsomely there, and it was wonderful. And they had a whole cast of people, and they were all dressed up, and this young man walked up to the microphone and said, "I'm going to break protocol here, and no doubt I will be corrected for doing this, but I'm doing it anyway," and said, "I am so happy to be here. My life has come full circle." It was one of the biggest events of my youth, coming to the Fine Arts Fiesta on the school bus from Tunkhannock Area School District to perform. And here I am as an adult and a professional after professional training performing. And when this is over, I'm going over to Iron Temple and having a snow cone. And I just thought that was great.
You know, and it's true, Brian. You know, you or Kathy, and we'll talk about some of the people on your team in a little while, because I know you've got a great support group on to help. But they've asked me quite a few times over the years if I'd like to introduce some of the artists performing, and it just worked out that way that I got to introduce my alma mater, the Wyoming Valley West Jazz Band, a couple of times.
Fantastic.
And just to see those young people already so skilled at their instruments performing at this great tradition in Wilkes-Barre, and you look out and you see their folks, their parents and their families watching them, and the pride of their teacher, their instructor. It's a great part of the Fiesta, absolutely.
We have this woman that comes every year when she began, which I'm not sure if it's 30 or 35 years ago, as a strolling performer, Mother Goose. At the time, she came from Newark, Delaware. Now she lives in Frederick, Maryland. There are people that are in their third generation of their family coming, taking pictures with her. The same with the mime. They're there. They have roots in the community, and they look forward to this. Now, I don't know of that many events and festivals that carry performers and cast members for that long, but they have become so popular with the people. Saskia here last year, for the first time in years, We did not have Flossie, the Fiesta clown, who is not a clown. She's a nurse.
Oh.
And she had some health issues and was unable to come. And we had a huge card, and everybody signed the card for Flossie. So,
I mean, you go to the Fiesta, you look at the artwork, you grab something to eat, and it could be a potato pancake or a cheesesteak or a gyro or ice cream, lemonade. And then while all this is happening, we have the music. And we just talked a little bit about it with some of the jazz bands and the students that have come in. But over the years, I remember Marshall Crenshaw a couple of years ago, the Spin Doctors, big crowd 2 years ago. My friend, and I assume he had to have become a good friend of yours over the years, the late great George Wesley.
he's a wonderful man.
Traditionally closed the event on Sundays
Yes.
for many years. Last time George ever played
Yes.
was at the Fiesta
And
9 years ago.
he did several fundraisers for us as well. George appreciated and walked around the Fiesta seeing what it did for people.
Mm-hmm.
And he saw that there was no pretense who could come, who couldn't come. You could spend the whole day and not spend a penny if you didn't want to. And he loved the premise that Annette said it was a free gift of the arts to all the people.
When they made that change, and you said it was sort of a big deal at the time to have Abilene come, which were a country rock band, and then eventually you start bringing in George with the reggae and Marshall Crenshaw and was it Leon Russell one year that you have?
Leon Redbone.
Leon Redbone, yeah. And then of course with the Spin Doctors, a '90s modern rock pop band. So the music. There is no clear definition now. Anything goes.
We had Martha Reeves and the original Vandellas.
Uh-huh.
Then she wanted to come back, and we brought her back with the Sister Vandellas group when she was no longer touring with the original Vandellas. We had the last incarnation with real members of the Platters. We had Leslie Gore. We had Taj Mahal. I had Alison Krauss. The year she was 18 or 19 years old, and I signed her, I'll whisper in your ear after this, but not on the air, for a fee that was embarrassing now. And we signed the contract, and I snail mailed the check to Nashville. In the meantime, she got the Grammy for Best Bluegrass. They called and asked to be let out of the contract, and I said no. They came for that paltry salary from Nashville on the bus. The bus broke down. They barely got here. She was the most lovely, gracious person I ever met. And after the show was over, the bus went down and they had dinner at Ray Hoddle's on South Main Street and went back to Nashville, and she became a superstar.
And she started working with Robert Plant, right? I mean,
she's a top-tier act now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So many great people on that stage over the years. One of the numbers that I was looking at just doing a little research for our interview, even though, like I said, I've been to the Fiesta for decades and was emceed a little bit here and there, but up to 60,000 people have been estimated to show up over the 4 days.
Yes, well, we have to understand the metamorphosis of the downtown. And when you think about in its peak and heyday of I will call it the former United Penn Bank building, was filled with offices and a buzzing, humming bank. We had full department stores. We had Blue Cross running 3 shifts. We had Social Security running 3 shifts. We had 2 newspapers in the town with full staffs and multiple properties. We had office buildings that were built after the flood, all filled. It was a buzzing, buzzing place. And the volume of people that would come, you could not get on the square at lunchtime, Thursday and Friday. It was so crowded. It was absolutely unbelievable. Now the dynamic has changed. People work from home. Blue Cross has a different parent company, and it's structured differently. Social Security has moved out of town. So we have a lot of different dynamics. But I feel that we still have, considering the size of the event, a very good size audience and crowd. And we do get a lot of people from the back mountain, from Hazleton, from the Poconos. But we do have an extensive marketing budget. And thanks to the Convention and Visitors Bureau, we have in our newspaper 65,000 plus circulation of our program. It goes to Hazleton, the Poconos, Scranton, besides Wilkes-Barre, and people have this tangible document in their hand that they can see our entire schedule and all our offerings.
Well, we're always happy and proud to sponsor the program every year. And, you know, to parlay what you're saying, the situation that you just referred to with downtown, and I tell people this all the time when we're talking about it, it's not unique to Wilkes-Barre.
Oh, no.
The pandemic changed the downtowns across the country.
Absolutely.
If you go to lower Manhattan to Wall Street right now, you will not see nearly as many people working as you did 5 years ago. All those commuters from New Jersey and Connecticut don't have to come in anymore to work the trades. And so that, to me, as a visitors bureau, has made events and things like the Kirby even more important to the
Absolutely.
downtown. We need to have a successful, busy Kirby Center. We need to have a successful Fine Arts Fiesta. And so while, as you said, you at one point, as recently as 5-10 years ago, sat right in the middle of all of this epicenter of activity, now the event is the activity. And so it's even more crucial to the city than ever.
Well,
That's how I look at it. Do you
I
feel
have
that
to
way?
say that I have been through many mayors and many city administrations and many public works directors and parks directors, and they all do their very best to cooperate with us. And we do our best to work within what they need. They're very, very good to us. And it is our sincere goal every Monday morning when someone drives around Public Square to see it clean and tucked away after the event of the Fiesta. We hold our stewardship very seriously.
You're a good I don't want to say tenant, but good guest for 4 days.
Well, we
Certainly.
try to be as organized for them as we possibly can, and they certainly go out of their way for us.
You mentioned some of the artists that were your favorites before, and that was a great story about Alison Krauss. Any other, doesn't even necessarily have to be a musical highlight, but since you have been involved now, well, if you do the math, you see your 50th year, the first year you sent some students there was 75, and so here we are 50 years later, and then the board shortly thereafter that, and so you've been around this event for 5 decades in one way or another. What are some of your favorite memories?
Well, I can remember Philip Santarelli on the board stating, we need to kick up our presentations to bring people downtown at night. And he suggested I contact Tuck and Patty, the jazz duo, who was making a lot of noise. And I called, I can't remember, it was Sunrise Artist, someone in California, and spoke to this man and had a great conversation. And we had Tuck and Patty. And it just resonated everywhere. Everyone, the square was very, very crowded. And then we bit the bullet, and Mayor Wilson of the Supremes had written her second biography, the next chapter, and we had thousands of people there. I remember Ron Ertley loaned us his traveling trailer, and we used that as her dressing room behind the band shell. And the line went down West Market Street with people that had album covers and books and everything for her to sign, because she had been on every television show promoting the book. And at the time, there was a Pennsylvania Festival Directors Association that was kind of tied into Pennsylvania Council on the Arts, and we met several times a year, and we would exchange experiences with acts. And I spoke to the people from Bethlehem Music Fest, and they hired her, and he called me and he said, "She has a toothache, what should I do?" I said, "Ask her if she wants a dentist." And so they got her a dentist, and it poured for their entire show that she performed, and she got on a plane and was on the legendary performance she did on Arsenio Hall the next night. And some of the people have just been so kind and gracious and appreciative. One of the things that we did before we went to the juried student show with the East Market Street side of the square, we had a tent and we had a curated exhibition of the late Graydon Mayer and his son Todd. And Graydon did these beautiful large watercolors, and his son did these beautiful large pastels. The exhibition was just breathless and belonged in a museum. And I think we sold 75% of the exhibition. It was such a beautiful exhibition and a wonderful addition to our presentation. And some of the guest professional artists we bring in to judge, people always will say, "Well, how is this really done?" This is done by one person, Gary Wummelsdorf, who puts together the entry forms, and we go around groveling for an empty space downtown to receive the artwork, which hopefully someday will be a problem for us because we won't be able to find one. But in the meantime, we've been using the last 2 years the old Rite Aid store, and hundreds of pieces are entered, and then we hire professional judges, and they come in and they select what goes in and what doesn't go in, what gets the awards and what doesn't. There's purchase awards, there's cash awards, there's different awards in each of the categories, and it's a daunting task. Then all those slips have to be cut off, they have to be marked in, they have to be marked out, then the people have to be notified, and then cards have to be typed. We have the same woman typing the identification cards for 30 years.
Oh, wow.
For the exhibitions. There's hundreds of people behind the scenes that do things to make this a go. This is not the product of just me. Believe me.
That was one of my questions.
Believe me. There is an army behind us.
You've got a great team. You've got your volunteers, your board.
Well, the board.
Kathy Baczynski.
And this is not a rubber stamp board. You do not get on this board and then just sit there. Every board member is chairman of a committee in an area. It's a working board. And it is a hard working board. And we just had a man step down. Ron Wozniak, who was our treasurer for 10 years, and something was said at the meeting. He said, "I'm not doing that anymore." And I said, "No, your sentence is over." And he chuckled. He said, "It was a sentence." But imagine doing all that check processing, depositing, and all that work for 10 years. We had another man that did it for 12, Rob Phillips from Pittston. These are dedicated souls that have really made this part of their lives.
Well, you know what I always say about boards, Brian? There's some people that get on boards because they genuinely want to help, and there's some people that get on boards because they like to walk around town telling people they're on boards. It doesn't sound like you have any of those people on your board.
No,
you gotta roll up your sleeves board.
Well, no, we have no choice.
Yeah,
we have no choice, and it's a feast or famine type of thing. From mid-February until the end of May, everybody's dancing to get through this on a hot griddle. It's a lot of work.
Well, I want to thank all those folks and yourself that make this event happen every year. Again, we are May 15th through the 18th this year at the Fine Arts Fiesta downtown Wilkes-Barre Public Square. You've got You've got a Saturday night headliner this year that some guys that I've known for a pretty long time, the Badleys, are coming in. Members of the Central Music Hall of Fame and the Luzerne County Hall of Fame, couple of national record deals, couple of national hits, toured with Bob Seger and Plant Page, and their resume is incredible, and their catalog of work and their body of songs is really, I think, what makes them stand out. So that's a great coup for you to bring the boys home for a show.
We're very excited about.
That'll be a terrific night. We had them at Rockin' the River 2 years ago, and they were wonderful. And they are at a point now where, when they do perform in the Valley, it's a bit of a homecoming show because they cut their teeth here in pretty much Wilkes-Barre and Harrisburg, where they're 2 springboard cities. And so a couple of times a year, it's a Kirby event now. They're not coming into one of the bars normally, and so or the rock clubs. And so the Fine Arts Fiesta is a great home for them, and we look forward to that. And all the entertainment and all the lineup and everything could be found on your website, fineartsfiesta.org. So if you're interested in specifics of who's playing on what nights and even down to the time slots, you should be able to find that on the Fiesta website.
Website is 29 years old.
We got
launched
early
it for the 40th anniversary. Yes.
So you've had that URL.
And our
a long
past
time.
president, who is now deceased, Howard Federick, said the theme was 40 and fine, and now online.
Well, you were right there in the mid-'90s when
Yeah.
everybody was jumping online. So 40 years for the website. Brian, before we part ways, so many people know you in the community from the Fiesta. And that's how I know you. That's how we met. And here at the Visitors Bureau, we talk a few times a year about, our involvement and so forth. But I like on the podcast, if we have a couple minutes at the end, just to let people know a little bit more about you, the person. So we know you were an art teacher, and that's how you first got involved with the Fiesta. What about your free time? What do you like to do to relax?
Well, I was an art teacher in Wilkes-Barre area for 22 years, and I was a principal for 14 years. And I also had a concurrent career at Misericordia University, and I started there in 1980, and I was there 35 years. And I started out as an adjunct professor. Then I was their art program director, their art student teaching director. Then I was their art gallery director and the director of cultural events. And I retired from there. And I have a beach house in Delaware for 35 years that, when I was young and foolish and didn't know any better, bought this place that is now probably my other IRA. And I'm very involved with my family, and I still live in Wilkes-Barre. I had a historical home in South Wilkes-Barre, and I sold it, and I moved back to take care of my dad. And when my parents had taken the home that my grandmother built when they came from Lackawanna County, so the home is in the family for over 100 years, and I'm still living there. Now I moved back there, and I guess I'm just a true Wilkes-Barrian. I don't know. I have a lot of pride in the friendships and relationships I've made, and I've been very blessed with so many people in my professional, personal, and artistic life. And I don't work as much artistically myself as I used to. I do some photography, but I don't do a lot of my own original work. But it's very interesting how you can stand back and see and assemble your thoughts from beginning to end, how you experience something. And it's been very nostalgic just thinking about some of these things here today, because you don't carry it with you consciously all the time. And when you mentioned about local artwork and different scenes, it made me think about different things and pieces of artwork that someone has purchased at the Fiesta that resonated with them and what it was. And there's truly so many stories that can be told And I think the Fiesta is so far beyond the wildest dreams what Annette Evans may have had.
Well, we thank you for your years of dedication to the arts, not only to your students, but to this wonderful event in the city of Wilkes-Barre. And we appreciate you. We're not going to say the R word, the rain word, because we know that sometimes has been a thorn in your side over the years, but we've also had some beautiful 4 nights in a row, and that's what we're going to be hoping for this year at the Fiesta. And Brian, again, thank you for joining us, and thank you for all that you do for the Fine Arts Fiesta in the city of Wilkes-Barre and the arts in general in our community. We appreciate it.
You're welcome, and thank you for all you do for this wonderful county.
Thank you.